Okay, welcome back. Today we're on 39. 39, I'm going to talk about Basto and diesel heaters. And this is for my buddy Lars over in Denmark, the nomadic Dane. He wants to put one in his Volkswagen and everybody's giving him some grief. So I'm going to explain to you the diesel heaters and some stuff about them. Diesel heaters, the most common one is an S-bar or a Webasto. And they have knockoffs, and I can't even pronounce the name, but they're the red ones. Now, the advantage to a diesel heater over a gas or a propane is that it uses very little diesel. Like in a night to keep a van warm, it probably will only use less than a liter of fuel a night, which is nothing. So they're really inexpensive, and they do last for, if it's a Webasto or a S-bar, it'll last a long time. So what we'll try to do is break it into a couple areas. I'll explain it, and then I'll show you how to put it in and everything else. So an S-bar, we'll go with the S-bar. What it is, you got a heater. Okay, now this one's going to be a hot box. So it blows air, hot air out, right? So you got electric line, you got an intake line, you got the exhaust line, and then you have the fuel line, okay? Now, the fuel line, we'll explain that in a minute. The exhaust cannot be by the intake. It's got to be in the opposite side, and it has to exit the vehicle. Very important. The intake line, because for combustion, it takes air from outside and puts it back outside, so you don't get no moisture content. So this one doesn't have to be by the, it can't be by the exhaust, because then you just recycle the exhaust. So put one way, one the other one. The electrical one is very easy. It goes to a switch or a timer. And then there's two wires that come to the fuel pump, which we'll explain in a minute. Okay? That is all there is to it. And there's a couple bolts under here with a plate. And the reason for the plate is because it heats up, and the plate will go, you cut that plate out, put it on the floor, and that way it won't burn the carpet or anything. That's the idea behind the plate. So, okay, we got that. We got through the first part of it without nobody falling asleep or nothing. Okay, the fuel system. The fuel system, you have your heater. Now this is, the fuel system is the most important thing. And you got the fuel line. Now you got a fuel tank here. Now, the first thing is, now this is all the gas guys too. If you want to put a diesel heater in, then you have to put a tank in. Now you can go anywhere. Buy a fuel tank, a plastic jug, or anything like that, and build a fuel tank. It can be out of aluminum, plastic, or nothing. The reason you don't get fumes out of a Webasto or a S-bar is because they don't have no return fuel. So that's where you get the fumes from, when it's return fuel. These only take so much fuel. So anyway, the fuel tank is whatever you want. Now, if you want to put it, what I would do, if it was me, if I was putting this in a gas vehicle, I would build like a 3-liter or a gallon fuel tank for it, with the line on it and all that stuff. And it's not that hard to do. And I would just put it in the back, bolt it down so it doesn't move around. And there's not going to be no fumes from it, because there's nothing going back to it. All this is basically is a storage unit. Now, if you want, you can hook it to the fuel system in the car, but that, you have to put the sender in and drill holes and all that. I don't really recommend that. I recommend the separate tank. Anyway, so we come from the heater, okay? Now, the fuel pump, I'll cover that in a minute. That's a very important thing. A fuel filter, and then into the tank. And this here has to be the minimum of 2 inches off the ground. Now, the reason for that, this is the car tank, not the one you make. The reason for that is if you put it to the bottom and you run the tank, or run the heater, and you got it to the bottom, you go to start your car up in the morning, it won't start, because you ran all the fuel out of it. So if you leave it up 2 inches, this will only go down to the 2-inch mark, and that'll leave you fuel that you can get to the gas station. Now, I don't recommend, the recommended for me, the minimum is halfway. If you're going to run this heater, the minimum is a half a tank. Minimum, full's even better. So the fuel comes up from here. Now, this heater, okay, now everyone's different, but just, I'll give you a number. You guys like numbers. That's how much that fuel pump will move. 25 cc's. That is nothing. But when you have this air heater and you got this fuel pump, these have to match. You can't take one off of anything and put on here. This here fuel pump, or sorry, the fuel pump has to match this heater. You can't take one off of a Basto and put it on a S-bar and yada yada yada. You can't do that. This fuel pump has to match the heater you got. And if you got a knockoff, then you have to put a knockoff fuel filter. Now, if you're able to find out and say that your pump pumps 25 cc's of fuel, if it pumps 25 cc's and a Webasto pumps 25 cc's, yeah, it'll work. But it has to be that number, because that number is what they use for the regulator and the pressure and everything else. So if it says it runs on a 25 cc pump, that's what you use. Don't put a 35, don't put a 50. It won't work. It just won't work. So the fuel filter, it doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's compatible to fuel. You can put any fuel filter on there. But on the Webasto one, it has an arrow, and yes, you do have to do that, because if you don't, you'll put all the dirt in the inside, and you don't want to know about that. But it has to follow the arrow. The fuel pump, 12 volts usually, or 24 volts, whatever, and it'll be a marking on it, 25 or 30 or 50 or 100 cc's. That's how much fuel it moves. And that number has to match with that heater, and vice versa. You can't mix them up. It has to be like that. Okay? Now, the fuel line. Look in the instructions, because most of them are up and down and everything. The trick to the fuel pump, this is the trick. It'll suck a low distance and push it to hell and back. Okay? So, you can't put the fuel filter by here and be 10 feet from the tank. It won't pump it. But you can put this on the tank and it'll push it up there and halfway to LA. Because they'll push it a long way, but they can't suck. They don't have a whole bunch of suck, but they'll push it. So that you have to look in your instructions, what it says. And the angle of the fuel filter and the hose has to be set, because what they don't want you to do is you get it, I like it almost level, because if you don't and you put it up high, when you turn it off, all the fuel runs back to the tank, or vice versa, right? So that, you got to keep that in mind. So the fuel filter, or the fuel pump, low, very low suck, but it'll push it a long way. You got to remember that. So that's the fuel system. Now, you got the air system, which really isn't that difficult. And most all these are all the same. Like, it doesn't matter. They're all basically the same. Okay, it blows hot air. Very important is the intake. If you mount that up against the wall, you might as well put lipstick on a pig, because it ain't going to work. Okay? So you got to, like, you read your instructions, and you'll find out you have to be 2 or 3 or 4 inches away from the wall, because it's got to suck the air in here. Now, with that said, you know, the dirt and all that garbage in the air is, you get a piece of filter material like you put in your heater at home and just put it on there, and it keeps the dirt from going inside. Nobody will tell you that, but just put a little filter on it here and clean the air, and then push it out. Now make sure this isn't going up against anything that will melt, because it does come out of there pretty hot. Okay? So keep an air gap here and make sure this is clear. Now the electrical. The electrical is, everybody gets paranoid about the electrical. These, like Webasto and S-Bar is built by Germans. And they have done the homework. Like I've been working with Webastos and S-Bar since they almost come on the planet. Well, I'm not that old, but since they come on the planet. And they come a long way from 1985 when I started working on these things. So, the electrical. You'll get this great big harness. And it's very simple. You got this big harness. You have a fuel pump. And you got a timer. I say put a thermostat on it. Now you can buy thermostats for them. It's not a big deal. And you got a battery, right? Positive and negative. And the harness is all wired. It comes pre-wired. It's plug and play. Okay, we'll go and take this plug and push it in there. Take this 2 wires and put them on here. Take this wire and plug into there. And take this wire and plug into the heater. That was friggin' difficulty, wasn't it? Okay? It's all plug and play. The only ones you have to do is the fuel pump, because they give you a whole bunch of wires. Like if you're like 20 or 30 feet from the heater, then they'll give you extra wire. You just cut it off and put the plug on it. That's all you have to do to it. That's it. Okay? That's it. It's plug and play. Okay, now the important stuff. We have a toggle switch. We have a timer. And we have a program off and on timer, which is a little different. Or no, that's a timer. This is temperature. Okay. Now, the thing about this is that the heater's wired for whatever you want. The plugs are already there. The switch, the timer, or the temperature thermostat. This one here turns it off and on. No in between. None whatsoever. This one here turns it on and off whenever you want. You can program it for 7 days in a row, or you can program it for a month, or you can program it forever to come on every 24 hours for 20 minutes. That's what the timer does. Now the temperature one, which I say is the one you should use, that one there is it's all plug and play. You don't have to worry about it. It's just plug it in. You don't have to do nothing to it. And you put it in, and it comes out, and then you just set the temperature, 60, 50, whatever you want. And it'll get up to, now they'll tell you where to put this, because you want it in somewhere in the cab area. You don't want it under the seat or under your grandma's seat or something like that where it'll never get warm. You got to have it where it can get the temperature of the vehicle. Okay? The most common temperature of the vehicle. So if you're sitting in the middle, that's where you want it. If you want to sit in bed, have it there. But this one here is the one I would go with. This one here. Now, it comes with a switch. You have to buy these extra, of course. But, like, these are $100, $200, but you can't do nothing without it. You can try putting a thermostat on here, but it doesn't work the same. It just doesn't work the same. These things are made, designed to work with the Webasto and the heaters. So try to stick with them. Like this whole thing, what the hell was Jack's? Jack's was almost about $800 installed. So that's not bad. And he'll never ever have to do anything with it. Maybe change a fuel filter every once in a while. That's about it. Okay? So that's on the Webastos. Now, the only other thing we haven't covered was mounting of it. Now these can be mounted anywhere you want. The air one, I think, can even be mounted on its side. And the water one is, it mostly you mount it up. It'll mount on its side, but I mount them up set. It's just gravity, you know, gravity flows. So on the water one, it's the same as the air one. All the electrical, the fuel's all the same. The only thing is it's got two lines coming out. Now what you do is you've got your engine here. Now if you want a water one instead of an air box, then put a water one in. And you got your heater right here. Now remember, the electrical, the fuel, the exhaust, it all works the same. And the only difference is that the heater goes into this heater, the Webasto or S-bar goes into here, right? And that heats up the heater. Well, all you have to do is you just pull this line off here, okay, and you put it to the engine. And then you take the engine and put it like this. So what you got is the water heating up, goes in the heater, into the engine and back. And it's a cycle. And just keeps going like this all the time. Very simple system. Now, there's another way which I don't really like, but I'll show. I don't think anybody uses it anymore. What they have was a Y, and it has two balls in it. And when you're using the heater, it'll put the balls in here and force it through here. I don't really like that system, so I don't use that one. But just put it in the circuit. Like that's how we did jacks. We put it in the circuit and it works just fine. And this here will keep it at that temperature. And that there temperature will keep you pretty warm, I would think. And this, even this one here, it still burns a liter, about a liter of fuel a night. You have to see the specs, but like it burns a liter, just under a liter at night. But when it's idling, after it's up the temperature, it burns ounces. Like I'm talking ounces. It's amazing. But anyway, that's what I got on the Webastos. If you got any questions, leave them in the thing. I'll try to answer them for you. And yes, you can put one in your vehicle, and it's not a big deal. It's just you have to think outside the box. Okay? Later.